As much as we're tired of discussing it, and you're probably tired of hearing about it, we have to discuss this issue that we're facing over the next few weeks because it could very well be the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. I'm talking about, of course, the debt ceiling. And before you click away, this video is going to be a little bit different than our previous videos on this discussion. We're going to look at this issue from a few different perspectives you may not be aware of. And I recently did a poll on this issue asking you, the community, what you think is going to happen. A full 53% of you selected that you don't think anything will come of this. And like times before, when we pushed up against the debt ceiling in this proverbial game of chicken, one side of the political aisle blinked and it amounted to nothing. And I'd like to believe that's what's going to happen this time around as well. I'm personally 50%, kind of like the community, about 50-50 on this issue, but I'm leaning a bit toward the direction that this could be the time when one side of the political aisle doesn't back down, which will, and I choose this word on purpose, forever impact the standing of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And don't make the mistake of just simply dismissing this or considering it business as usual or other people's problems. If there is a default, things will likely fall apart quickly, and the US will never really regain what it's about to potentially lose. And I think that's the takeaway here. This is not a singular event that we simply move on from. It will follow our nation the rest of our lives. In this video, I'm going to quickly explain the debt ceiling in simple terms, but the main focus of this video will be more on what may happen next if this does not get resolved. Some will say that no increase should happen until there are spending cuts. Others will say that the president should use the 14th Amendment, while some legal scholars argue that he can't, and others are pushing just to raise it. Still, others are encouraging that we just simply let it blow up. And I'll take a look at each of these. There are just 2 weeks before the U.S. is technically unable to pay its bills anymore. It's really economic suicide if we get to that point. I'll also let you know what you should be doing now to prepare for this. You'll also want to watch to the end because we skipped a giveaway last week, so I'm going to put in 2 giveaways in this video, and I'll explain a little bit more about how you can be eligible for that. So let's go ahead and jump in. What is a debt ceiling? Let's just briefly explain this. The debt limit or debt ceiling restricts how much the federal government can borrow to pay its bills and allocate funds for future investments. Almost every year, the government spends more than it collects in taxes. That's the deficit. Now, to make up the difference, it borrows money, which accumulates over time, and that's called the debt. Now, when Congress appropriates or directs government money to be spent, the government is obligated to pay those funds, creating a bill that it must pay. Now, Congress has increased or suspended, never reduced, the debt limit 78 times since 1960. I have covered this more in depth in some other videos, which I'll link to in the comments and the description section below if you want to do a deep dive into the meaning and history a bit more. Now, you may remember the last considerable debate on this in 2011, just after the 2008 recession, when military benefits and pay got held up and some federal workers were furloughed. Then, Congress stopped agreeing to pass annual debt limit increases, and they passed short-term limit increases instead. A pattern then emerged where these debates became more contentious with each vote. What happens if it's not raised? I covered most of what will happen in a video that I did a few weeks ago. Again, I'll link to that below. In that video, I cut through the BS and the media sound bites to try to explain the real ramifications of default. So I invite you to check that video out if you want to find out more. In a nutshell, not raising the debt ceiling is like spending money, but ignoring the past due notice. Immediate consequences, they include postponing retirement account payments for the federal employees and holding up paychecks for the military, Department of Defense, and other essential workers. Now, beyond just the military, federal employees include food safety inspectors, air traffic controllers, Border Patrol and Customs personnel, postal workers, FEMA, Coast Guard reservists, disaster management personnel, housing, and national parks, to just name a few. Now, also payments for ongoing federal contracted projects, such as things like bridges, roads, airports, and infrastructure, they would all be held up. Payments to Social Security, Medicare, welfare, and food stamp recipients could be suspended, as the administration would have to pick between sending checks to seniors, the poor, and others, or making interest payments on the debt. Now, federal contracted construction projects for bridges, roads, airports, and more could also be suspended. In the past, a similar standoff led to a 20% drop in major stock indexes, wiping out trillions in household wealth and impacting retirement accounts. Now, people postpone large purchases because of their financial insecurity. So the real estate market could freeze over, even as interest rates push to 8% or higher. Now, new construction grinds to a halt in these scenarios. Some estimates suggest that more than 8 million jobs could be wiped out. In a deeper recession, inflation are guaranteed here at home. This would trigger a recession, job losses, and a freeze in the real estate market. And the global impact would be severe, with the dollar's reserve currency status being quickly eroded and countries increasingly turning away from the U.S. It would give a healthy boost to the autocratic and communistic nations comprising BRICS, who are already seeking alternative currencies to the United States dollar. It would also erode global confidence in our political system, damaging our standing in the world. Now, these scenarios are not extreme, but they're actually based on past debates. And here's the kicker. Even the possibility of these events could slash our credit rating and erode confidence in the U.S. economy and the dollar for years to come. The unknown consequences of default make a situation even more dire, as the U.S. has never really defaulted before. How this changes the world. So can we just let it all blow up and default on paying the bills due on all that money that's already been spent? Now, some theorize we should break the cycle of spending more than we bring in and inflating the national debt. Consider it the hard reboot crowd's philosophy. The difficulty here is that a reset is not guaranteed, and millions of people will feel the pain. Perhaps most importantly, though, defaulting would erase overnight America's influence in the world built after World War II. Of course, there are going to be people that will say good to that as well. And some are accelerationists whose philosophy is that we should suffer a societal collapse and start anew. And I think there's a video ideal here that I may explore later. Spoiler alert, when economies do crash, in almost every single instance, the ultra wealthy only become more wealthy, as they always do the same thing in these type of downward cycles. They snap up assets at bargain prices, and the poor become just more poor. It's not the other way around, but I digress. With certainty, a default that lasts even a few weeks will plunge the world into a deep recession. Many countries would challenge supplies to Ukraine. America's ability to enforce international conduct would be questioned and challenged. And likely, China would see this decline of the U.S. economy and the economic instability as an opportunity to make territorial gains that would not be challenged. As a whole, BRICS would get a booster shot in the arm, and an alternative currency to the dollar for international transactions would rise overnight, and the US dollar would forever be in competition, having lost its once vaulted status. Russia would subjugate more countries and harvest their gold, as they're currently doing in Sudan, to further support invasions. At the absolute very least, the fall of the dollar off the world stage, the resulting recession or depression, and the slowing to a crawl of the world trade would force the U.S. into dark isolationism, punctuated by poverty and a lack of essential services. Let that sink in for a minute. Now, complete default will forever alter America's standing in the world and forever change how we negotiate our finances. We will no longer have the upper hand in global affairs or trade deals, and people need to understand this. That all sounds super fun, right? Is there a solution? Oddly enough, the closer that we get to the estimated date when we run out of money to pay the bills, which is June 1st, the least likely any substantial change will occur. Any actual legislation would take longer to craft than the time remaining before we run out of money. The president and the GOP, they remain divided over the debt ceiling. The House Speaker has put forward a plan called the Limit, Save, Grow Act, and the president will surely veto it because it really, according to some economists, lacks specific cuts, but proposes to cut several measures that he fought for in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And if you look at what is happening in DC, it's like we're all on a driverless bus, careening towards a cliff and simply blaming each other for the fact that there is no driver. If the war in Ukraine were to cease, liquid natural gas, oil, and grain supplements stabilize worldwide, and global financial markets were less speculative, it's possible that things could get better, perhaps even improve. But those are too many conditions not likely to be achieved in the next 2 weeks. Such an exertion of executive privilege would immediately be challenged in the courts. And at this point, though, that may be the only viable option for it if members of Congress cannot come to an agreement and we want to avoid a debt default. Now, neither party wants to be caught holding the bag on a shutdown and the destruction of the economy. And all the while, they're mutually holding the bag until the very last second they can, and that could easily result in a misjudgment where the point of no return is. There may yet be a compromise or solution, but it's really murky at best. And the deadline, it's going to be here very soon. Now remember, we don't have to get to these extremes before millions suffer. As we collectively get closer to that critical date and the debate and blame game continues without any substantial change in how things are done, you can expect the accounting maneuvers of the Treasury's extraordinary measures to become more sweeping and severe. You can expect that the US dollar and confidence in the US economy is going to continue to decline, as will America's influence around the globe. You can expect that progress will be put on hold, the recession will deepen, inflation will move to double digits, and millions will suffer from employment, housing, and food insecurity. Now, we're still in the early days of this, but the crisis will swiftly come to a head. Giveaway. For this week's giveaway, we'll give away 12-pack portable water purifier packs to one winner and one second after trilogy to another. And to be eligible for a chance to win either of these giveaways, just simply post a comment below and click the thumbs up icon to like the video. For a following video, I'm going to use a tool to draw a winner from the comments on this video randomly. And for the last video's winner of the dual fuel camping stove, the winner is the subscriber Girl DeBoro. I'll be reaching out to you shortly to get that sent to you. What can you do? If it's going to happen and we're going to get right up to that deadline or beyond it, confidence in the US economy and the dollar is going to continue to evaporate around the world. Inflation and interest rates will soar, and there's not a whole lot that we can do about it to avoid it. While there are probably clever investment strategies out there for the super rich and members of Congress to really insulate themselves, even profit by short selling America, I'm not sure there's enough there to keep the country from long-term irreversible damage. That said, for everyday people like you and me, there are several things that we can do. One recent commenter summed it up by simply writing that we should continue doing what we've been doing all along, which is preparing. Anticipating this default possibility and continuing your prepping is really the key to weathering the storm. Following a default, prices across the board would experience significant fluctuations as everyone attempts to assess and factor in the increased risk. The cost of imported goods is expected to rise, and there would likely be a spike in oil prices as petrostates shift to pricing oil in alternative currencies. Panic may grip the population as media outlets and other sources highlight stories of default and potential shortages. An unfounded fear could lead to panic buying, resulting in sold-out supplies of items such as ammunition and, as we've seen recently, toilet paper. Now, additionally, the cost of food is likely to increase. If you have a 3-month supply of food, as we recommend in our video similarly named, which I'll link to below, in a garden or some other source to produce or acquire local food, you're going to be insulated from both the dramatic price increases, the panic buying, and the inevitable disruptions of our food supplies. What you're doing with your food supply is buying yourself time to plug in your own solution to the larger problems. As the recession worsens and unemployment skyrockets, the pressure on infrastructure becomes greater as routine maintenance, repairs, and new systems is going to continue to fall. And when these systems go offline, they are slow to come back online. Alternative sources of water and energy are essential. And again, I have to refer you to the videos that I've linked to in the comments for more ways that you can prep for this eventuality. And from a financial standpoint, the only silver lining in the cloud is we all suffer the devaluation of the dollar together. Rich, poor, young, or old, our dollars all spend the same. They buy less and it takes more of them. An all-out dramatic collapse is less likely than a long, drawn-out series of failures and collapses. And because of this, it's important to position yourself to survive through it and thrive coming out of it. I would encourage you to implement small strategies as we detail in the recession-proof guide, which we'll make available for free. It's just a downloadable guide that we'll give to you in the link in the description and comment section below. So many financial lessons aren't passed from generation to generation. Let's be honest, the systems change. Still, there are some constants that you can apply today to get you better positioned to face a chaotic and declining fiscal future. As the old saying goes, a recession is opportunity in wolf's clothing. And really coming in on the heels of a global war, a current recession, and several high-profile financial institutions failing, this debt ceiling debate could not come at really a worse time. And I'll be honest with you, this time has the potential to be worse than the previous market downturns that we've experienced. If you felt the recession of 2008, and I remember what that was like going through that time, there's a lot of uncertainty, I assure you this one could potentially be far worse. It also has some of, as of yet, unforeseen possible further collapses, like more banks and the entire commercial real estate market. The only thing you can do with certainty to brace and prepare for it is to prep. With every downturn, typically there is a recovery where we brush ourselves off and hopefully learn our lesson, hopefully. And it doesn't appear that we're going to see that for perhaps the rest of this decade. Your preps are really a life raft in these scenarios. Let me finish by saying this. I would encourage you to keep preparing. Whatever it is you're doing, whether that's storing up food, working on gardening, building a water reserve, developing skills, working on energy, security, building. Again, there's so many different aspects to this. If I were someone watching this video and you're saying, look, I'm just starting out, I have no idea where to begin, my advice is to focus on food. Again, I'll post a link to a video that we did a while back about 3 months is all you need as a prepper. We go into a lot of detail about that. Very specific video. I would encourage you to build with your community, whether that's a church, whether that's family, whether that's neighbors, whoever and whatever is your community, build with them. Is there someone that you know that needs help in your community? I think this is going to be the time where we're going to have to help each other more than usual if this situation plays out. And even if it doesn't, we're clearly in a time where people are stretched thin. And if you're in a position to help, I would encourage you to do so. It's that old principle of sowing and reaping. When you give, when you help others, the hope is one day you'll get that in return. That principle doesn't always play out, but there's nothing wrong when it's in your ability to help others that need it, especially those that are in your group, your family, your community that really need it. Again, I look at this time as not a time to be pessimistic. It's just another indicator to me that we're living in a time of transition, uncertainty. Hey, fingers crossed, nothing happens. That this is just another game of chicken that we've seen time and time again. This debt ceiling issue, we get it resolved, we move on, and I'd love to believe that. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I feel like we're kind of on a 50-50 split here. I could really see this going out either way because let's just say, watching how Congress has behaved here recently, I just don't see a scenario where this is going to end quickly or amicably. I don't know. I'll just finish by saying this. I think there's potential for uncertainty and this to play out in a wrong way. But I like to be optimistic and hope that that they do resolve it and then we all move on and we bump up again next time. And we just realize, okay, this is a game of chicken that will always be played. So what are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen? I'd be curious to hear. Feel free to post that below. And as always, stay safe out there.